Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is me, Jonathan Alexander, and I'm here to host our show, Life, Laughter, Happiness. Today, I have my co-host Barbara here with me. Are you there, Barbara?
I sure am. Hi, Johnny. How are you today?
Good. Now, I want to say that our guest today is Astrologer Jessica Lanyadoo. We will not be taking calls, but we will be here Friday with Dale Shear. Our guest today is Jessica Lanyadoo. Are you there? Can you hear us okay?
I'm here, and thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Jessica.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited. I love astrology. Wow, what a treat today.
I know. I love it, too, and it is my joy to be here with the two of you.
Awesome.
Now,
thanks, Johnny. Thanks for having her.
What exactly, I got her out of the book, The Top 100 Top Psychics in America, and it says here that you didn't want to be too far out there. And this, could you please explain that? I got this from the entry in the book, too far out there. What does that mean?
Sure. Well, that is how I felt when I was first starting as an astrologer. I really, I came to astrology in the early 1990s and, before the internet, before it was particularly popular. And people told me they thought I was psychic. I didn't believe them. And I was scared of being too far out there, being too weird, and it's kind of a funny thing for me to say because I am objectively pretty weird, but, I grew into myself. But yeah, I really I didn't quite believe in psychic ability. I didn't believe in mediumship. And when those things became so evidential in my life and in my private practice as an astrologer, I was just like, well, I guess I gotta change my mind as I'm seeing, evidence of things being different than I thought. And it's really been something that's developed, my psychic ability, my mediumship abilities have really developed since my 30s, not as much when I was younger.
Okay. That's what I was just going to ask you is what age? Okay, so in your 30s, you were just saying, I'm going to have to accept this, or really deny it because things were happening. What kind of things were happening?
Yeah. That's a great question. It was a lot of things. So the first thing that's important for me to share is that I was a full-time consulting astrologer. So I had clients, I was meeting with clients every day in my office, consulting them as an astrologer. And most people, especially at that time, didn't know the difference between astrology and psychic and medium. So people would ask me to do things that would require psychic ability, or they would ask me to communicate with their dead. And I would be like, I really don't know how to do that. I don't even think that's possible. And they would just be like, I believe in you, please try. And I was younger and I didn't have as good boundaries. And so I would try for them. And in the end, I had this incredibly high accuracy rate. And that went on really, I would say probably like 29 through 31 years old, maybe 32 years old. And, at a certain point I had to be like, this is not a coincidence. This is happening with too many people. And it became, more and more, like I say, evidential. It was just things like there's no way I could know that were verifiable. So as that all happened, it just kind of, it started to get more and more intense for me. And I feel like I was really lucky that I was already a consulting astrologer because I had clients to practice with, and I already had like the lifestyle of being very, esoteric. And yeah. So,
what else were you doing?
So I was already practicing as an astrologer and also a tarot reader, although within probably like 5 years of me realizing my psychic ability and really working with it, I don't use the tarot as much because it's not necessary, although I still work with the cards. I'm also an animal communicator, so I do all of those things. And then I also have a podcast, and I write articles and books and stuff like that. One book only, actually.
One book? That's good, though. But I just wanted to know before you go on, because that's a lot. Can a person in general make a good living being an astrologer, or do you have to add on more things like having a podcast, writing a book, adding to that? Or what if you just do astrology and word of mouth and a little marketing, then you could make a good living off of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was making a full-time living. So I became a full-time consulting astrologer in 1999, towards the end of 1999. Within a couple of years of that, I had quit all my side jobs. And I, have been a full-time consulting astrologer until 2022. I stopped taking one-on-one clients because I saw things coming, and I knew I didn't want to be working with clients at that time. Yeah, I was working with people in person and by video chat and the phone. I've been doing that my whole career because I'm from Montreal, Quebec, and I live in Oakland, California. So I always knew that at a certain point I would want to move back to Canada, which I will do one day. So I always kind of organized my career to be portable. But yeah, I definitely think that a person can make a full-time gainful living as an astrologer, especially these days because astrology is so popular. And I certainly was and am. I mean, but now I do have things other than consulting in my life.
But you have been doing it a long time, even before the digital age in the early 90s. Yes. And so you were saying, though, your whole career you were able to do the video chats. This is before a lot of other people were doing that. Is that
I
what
was
you
Skyping.
did?
I was Skyping with people. Skype has been around for a really long time. Yeah, so I would Skype with people around the world and meet with them that way. Although, it really wasn't until Zoom that I feel like people kind of really expected video conversations. But a lot of people use Skype. So I've had a Skype account for a really long time. But yeah, for me, as whether I'm doing psychic work or astrology consultations, making eye contact is really lovely, but it's not necessary for the work. So working by phone is quite pleasant for me. I used to have one of those sweet little headsets that I'd wear. And so I felt like I was on the set of 9 to 5. I really enjoyed it. So I quite liked it. Yeah.
And you could be at
but
home.
I definitely.
How wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Which I really like. And I also will say that I love the work so much, but something that's really important in terms of making a living as an astrologer or a psychic that I think we don't talk about enough in spiritual circles is the business end of it. We have to, email people and communicate and deal with a lot of administration. And that is something that I've always kind of taken seriously. And I think that's part of what helped me to have a thriving private practice before the digital age, before astrology was really popular.
Yes, but how did you get your clients in the beginning?
Good question. Here's the answer. Word of mouth. It was the first couple of years when I moved to San Francisco in 1994, I mainly did barter. So I would, give a 2-hour-long reading for an aloe vera plant or a baked lasagna. I really started small. And I'm Sun, Moon, and Rising all in Capricorn, and I have pretty anti-capitalist values. And so for me, I wanted to be able to grow into my career, and I wanted to feel like what I was doing, that I wasn't ever overcharging because I wanted to do it forever. So what I would do is I would do these trades, and then eventually it became a sliding scale, and then eventually it just became, a flat fee. And over the course of time, what would happen was I just worked within my community. I worked within my community, which was I'm gay, so it was queer people, social workers, and artists. And that was my kind of immediate community in San Francisco. And over the course of a few years, I'm a very patient person, I developed a reputation. So people sent me their parents and their exes and their best friends and their roommates. And that kind of built and built. And then eventually, I think it was 2003, I got my first weekly column in the San Francisco Bay Guardian, which was the progressive free paper here. It's now defunct. But I became the weekly horoscope columnist there. And that expanded my reach. I also started doing kind of tarot nights once a week at various locations, and that expanded my reach. And
in person?
It really, those were in-person events, And then eventually, I was booking out a month in advance, a couple months in advance, and then the last few years of my career, I was booking out a year in advance. And that sounds really good, and I feel very honored for it, but it's also, it kind of makes everyone unhappy. It made the clients unhappy. It wasn't very flexible for me. So that was kind of a little bit sticky. But I really am a fan of like the slow build because it allows it allowed me to like build my reputation based on skill and ethics, which is really important,
The ground up.
Yeah, the ground up. That's it. That's exactly it.
I have a question because it's funny. Many years ago, I tried to do astrology myself, and I'm not putting it down, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't figure it out. It was like a 5-year-old trying to put together a VCR. It just doesn't work. And actually, unless of course you're Sheldon Cooper, then you could put it together. But what I'm trying to say is I couldn't understand it. So I started researching numerology. And, numerology and astrology are actually cousins in a way. And some people are just very, very good at numerology, and some people are just really good at astrology. I mean, when I did numerology, I was able to be at college, and I would read for people without writing anything down. And people would give me names, and then I would read the name. And, do you find that some people are just really good at something like that and then not so good at something else? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, numerology, I agree. And astrology, they're both math-based, right? They're both numerical. And there's certainly crossover. And then also astrology, if we're being honest, is incredibly boring to learn because it's so detailed and there's so much memorization. And I've done some kind of beginning astrology classes, and it's very difficult for me because it's so much homework, and I'm such a stickler for people doing homework that I was just like frustrated all the time. So I don't really teach that way anymore. But it is really, there's so much to learn to be able to do the fun stuff with astrology. And so I definitely don't, it's not even about like aptitude. I think it's more about like, do you have that kind of time and interest? It's a big undertaking. Whereas, when, for instance, I'm a tarot reader, it's not as big of an undertaking. There's rules to learn and all of that, but it's not like astrology, which is just like literally you have to learn a language and before you can even start to use it.
Are there different levels within astrologers with your lingo, or do you just know just by talking with somebody what level they are at, or is it to where either you know it all or you don't? What is it? Because I know about this. There was a recent death of a very famous movie star / very, like you, knowledgeable and published astrologer. And on top of that statement, I just wanted to ask you if you had anybody that you looked up to in that astrology world that was really good at a high level. And do you know who I'm talking about?
I don't know who you're talking about, but I'm dying to know who you're talking about. They were a famous actor and astrologer?
Yes, a woman. Famous
White
in the
was
1950s.
An astrologer?
Yes.
You're kidding me.
In New York. Very famous actress. Yes.
Wait, are you saying it's Betty White?
No.
Oh, I got really excited. I was just like, Betty White was perfect.
I know her
She
too,
was
though.
really perfect.
Okay.
Really?
Good person to talk about, too. But no, it's not her. But I will tell you, ready? I think Johnny might be guessing.
Yeah.
Arlene Dahl.
Who? Wait, I don't know who that is. I was telling Johnny before we started.
She
the
was
worst at
married to Fernando Lamas, the first Argentinian actor in the 50s that became very famous. He was married to Arlene Dahl, who did a lot of the movies during the era of Marilyn Monroe. A lot of people haven't heard of her, but she was Lorenzo Lamas' mom, married to Fernando. Then they got divorced, and Fernando went on to marry the $1 Million Mermaid, Esther Williams. So it was all entwined. But she was a famous actress. You can Google it, and then you'll see all of her movies.
I will. And she was an astrologer as well.
Yes, and then
That's
she
so
was really into that. She was a Leo like me, and she had a column in a New York paper, like The Inquirer. She had it for years.
Really?
Yes, and she has written many books on it, and she was one of those famous astrologers, and went on to, she was a great businesswoman like yourself, and she reminds me of you, and she had a fabulous country home in New York and a New York gorgeous apartment in a fabulous place with a doorman. I mean, she wasn't hurting. And, you know, a lot of those people who were actresses, I guess they're okay, but sometimes I think they might end up maybe hurting. Maybe I'm wrong. They seem to always die with beautiful homes. Well, she was one of those. And anyway, I was engaged to Lorenzo Lamas for a few years. So I really was close with her. And she wrote my whole entire astrology. And it is in-depth, thick reading, like written, all my stars, all my planets, every part of it. I couldn't believe it, Jessica. So I know what goes into what you do fully, and I really admire you. It's a definite thing you need to study.
Well, what I was going to say
oh,
sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I'm going to look her up. That's really cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Arlene Dahl, Dahl. Yes, she was gorgeous. Go ahead, Johnny.
Well, before the show, I was telling her about a person that we've had on the show a couple of times named JoJo Savard. You weren't around when that happened, Barbara, but we've had her on. And this is Jessica's childhood idol. So I'm going to try to possibly do maybe the show in the future where we can have them both on at the same time, maybe, you know.
It makes me nervous just to think about it because JoJo Savard, her tagline was, "I love you when I kiss you, baby." She was just so full of life and so wild and fun, and she's an astrologer and a psychic and just really just a huge presence in the province of Quebec, where I'm from at the time when I was growing up. So I am 47 years old.
Not you. Oh, I'm so sorry, Jessica, that you thought I was asking you, because I would never do that. I was asking how old
I'm an astrologer.
Was.
I love talking about age. That's one of my favorite things to talk about as an astrologer.
Okay. Well, how old is JoJo?
I don't know.
Well, maybe
I know she has a dog.
Approximately. Is she getting older, or is she elderly? Jessica?
She's definitely older. She's got to be, she's definitely at least 20 years older than me, maybe 30 years older than me.
She would
20, 30?
be willing to do the show again? Because Johnny said it was before I was around, so
I'll ask her. I'll definitely approach her.
Oh, that would be fun.
And have them both on. That would be great.
Yeah. That would be so fun. I can attest to the fact that she's still posting on Instagram, so she's still out there.
Okay, cool. So, let's just make it happen if she's already been on. So that'll be fun to look forward to. And I want to talk about where you are from, because you mentioned, Montreal and Quebec, and what a wonderful area, and you'd like to move back there. What is it about that area? Is that the French? Speak French, if it is?
I do speak French, although I'm not perfectly fluent because I've been here in the U.S. now for 25 years. But I definitely want to move back to Canada broadly because it's a much kinder place to grow old, and it is, it's just got a lot of social systems in place that don't exist in the U.S., and that is very appealing to me.
And what's the weather like?
What's that?
The weather there. In what city exactly?
Oh,
what's
terrible.
The weather like? Do you have the 4 seasons?
Definitely the 4 seasons. So I'm from Montreal, which, is very cold in the winters and very hot in the summers. But it's very much 4 seasons, yes.
Nice.
The longest season is definitely winter. But in the city of Montreal, there is an underground city. So the subways there's like city streets essentially that are in the subways.
Cool.
And there's malls that bloom from the subways. So you can never really go outside and, go to the dentist, go see a movie, go to school, and just kind of do it all throughout the underground city. Yeah, it's very cool. It's very,
stay warm.
I mean, it keeps you, exactly, it keeps you off the ice. But it's likely that if I moved back, I would move to Toronto, which is not far from there, but it is a little bit more temperate than Montreal is, and it's a lot more English speaking, which I am primarily an English speaker. So I'll probably go back there.
I've been there one time.
But it's a lovely city.
I have been there one time just for the day. It is gorgeous there, and it kind of reminded me of the streets when we were walking to our venue of what we were doing. It reminded me of where I'm from, Seattle, Washington. It was a lot of coffee shops. Yes.
I could see
really
why it would remind you of Seattle. Yeah, it's lovely, except for if you go in the winter, in which case it is not like Seattle at all.
It was like
week.
kind of Seattle weather, like crisp. So I don't know what month that was. I forgot. But it was just wonderful just for the day in and out. And so I can say I've been there. But I had a dance partner from that area, and he was just like you. But he did speak French, but rarely speaking French, but maybe to your parents or something. So I think that's such a great area, and can you tell for yourself as a psychic that you will move back, or do you have to wonder, or can you read for your own self?
Reading for my own self is hard, but I moved here in 1994, and there was a few things that I knew the moment I moved here. I set basically what my little 19-year-old brain knew was that by the time I was 30, I was going to have mastery over basic astrology and would be cultivating my skill set as a medical astrologer. And in fact, by the time I was 30, I was lecturing to other astrologers about medical astrology. The next thing I knew was that if I was still living in the San Francisco Bay Area by the time I was 40, that I would move to Oakland, so across the bridge. And in fact, 4 weeks before my 40th birthday, I moved to Oakland, California. And I always knew that I would move back to Canada at around 50 years old. And I'm 47, and I am angling back. So I haven't made the plan yet.
Wow.
And so it's possible I won't make it there until 60 or 55. But that's the only kind of premonition that I had at the age of 19, that I'm not old enough to have come true yet. But I'm pretty close.
So it's not about wanting, like most people, I want to live in Huntington Beach someday and make it happen. It's like you knew. No. I can't say that I knew that was going to happen, but I wanted it. So that's a difference. And it's really an intense feeling, or what? No, something.
For me, it's a simple clarity. It's just this I just kind of I know that I'm going to have coffee in the morning. It's not emotional. It's not a yay or a nay. It's what I do. I just know it. And it's a similar thing for me with intuition in general. It has a real neutral clarity about it. So that is it for me. And I can't tell you that I'm missing Canadian winters from my cushy life in California, where it's just like spring and summer. Sometimes it's autumn, but never for more than a couple weeks at a time. It's very lovely weather out here. Yeah, but I do. I definitely miss the peacefulness that is in Canada compared to the U.S. and it's just much more spacious. And I do want to move to a more a more relaxing phase of my life.
I like that. And you know what?
Thank you.
Back to the feeling. I do have that. And sometimes when I'm communicating with somebody, or even if I'm not, but I see them, I know what they are thinking. I mean, I just absolutely do know it. Is that a form of psychic ability?
I would say yes. Do you identify as someone with psychic ability?
Oh, what was that?
Do you identify as having psychic ability? I mean, that sounds like psychic ability to
yes.
me.
I feel like, yes, with the knowing what people think or are going to even do, and they do it or say or feel. I really am intuitive, but I'm wondering, is this called telepathy when I know what they're thinking? And which comes true.
Interesting.
Because by their actions and behaviors, it was true what they were thinking.
Yeah. I think that's what telepathy is. Telepathy, in my experience, is generally a communication with either words or pictures of thoughts. And it can be done, it can be experienced in different ways by different kinds of minds, different kinds of people. But yeah, that to me is telepathy. And interestingly, if you have the capacity for telepathy, then you can be an animal communicator, because essentially what animal communication is telepathy. It's sharing pictures that resonate. Right, that makes perfect sense, because it's the same skill set. It's just, different kinds of people to use it. Right.
But I'm not really I don't think, as far as doing it over. And by the way, everybody, I do not want to be professionally a psychic or anything, but being on the show, we have psychics on a lot, and we do talk about ourselves. And I just like to know that I have it, be in tune with it by everything you guys say, to opening yourselves to it, and then go with it, like go with your gut. But I just being in tune after being on the show so long, I really feel like it is a thing with me, and I just want to use it. But I always have. Since I was a little girl, I always have used it anyway, because my dad kind of said, like, power of the mind. You could do anything. So I started doing this thing called the power of positive parking, and every single time, and we'd all do it in the cart, and we'd find the spot right in front and never go look for
amazing.
The other worst spot, because that's a doubt. So you go right for the front every time, and there it is. And my dad said, every single time we walk into a empty restaurant, I will walk in. You can see from the window, it will fill up. Sure enough, every single restaurant he did that, and it happened. And he would say that when he was a little boy, we'd go to school, and if he looked at this kid that would always have a sty in his eye, if he didn't look at the kid for months, he wouldn't get one. But as soon as he looked at that kid and saw his sty, he would get a sty in his eye.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
so your father
was really
was
opened
a real
up
magician.
to the fact, like, I could do it. And I would move out neighbors when I was older. I moved them out if I didn't like them. I would see the people come in looking at the apartment, and I wouldn't even have to go in or play any tricks. I would just look at them, focus on their brain, and make whoever it was get the apartment that I wanted, like that, and make the other ones leave and never come back and not be chosen.
Wow. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really sounds very valuable.
Thank you. So I use it, but I like how you use it, and you've used it your whole life. You dedicated your life to it. But I am wondering, when you were in Canada, what made you move to California? Was it your school, college? And what were you studying, if so?
No, I didn't go to college. Well, I went in the province of Quebec, we have something called CEGEP, which is high school goes until grade 11, and then there's this 2-year government-funded college program called CEGEP. And it's just, incredibly cheap, and it allows you to take university courses so that you can decide what you want to truly do in university. I went to an alternative CEGEP, and that is where I started to study astrology formally, because there was a class that was an introduction to astrology from a Jungian perspective. And it was taught by the professor who taught Jungian psychology in the kind of normal, the main college. I took that class in 92, I think, and I was just like, well, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. And then he taught an intermediate class, and I didn't even bother graduating from the college. I was just like, this is it. It's what I'm going to do.
Wow.
So I packed my bags and I moved to San Francisco. And the reason why San Francisco is because at the time, there was nowhere else in North America that there was an astrology community where I could have expected to make a living.
Right.
Or, meet people who'd be interested in it. Like now, you think it's San Francisco and technology, you think San Francisco, it's insanely expensive. At the time, there was no tech and it wasn't expensive. I mean, at all. Like, it wasn't the same thing at all. It was a very different place. It was very spiritual.
You were saying it was a gay community, correct?
Well, I am gay, and it was a great place to be for a gay person, but there was astrology community here.
So that was the reason more for the astrology.
It was more for the astrology, yeah. Because where I'm from, it was a very easy place to be gay, but in terms of astrology, no way. There's just no way that I could have pursued my dreams. Yeah, in Montreal, exactly. So San Francisco was the place. Yeah, San Francisco was the place.
Interject. Sorry, Jessica, hold the thought, please. I just wanted to interject something. You really were ingenuitive when at a young age, 19, and after you finished this explanation of what we were talking about, please tell us where you got all of these skills. Must be something to do with your parents. I mean, because I noticed this. You did a lot on your own and a lot of research and a lot of decisions, and I guess you guided yourself really. So go ahead and continue.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. My mother's parents are Holocaust survivors. And when my grandfather, arrived in Canada, he, didn't speak any English. He didn't speak any French. He worked in sweatshops, and he brought his whole family over. And eventually he ended up, owning his own schmata business, his own, he did stuff with clothes. He was not a seamstress. That's what they're called that for women. But, he worked with clothes. And what I learned from my grandfather was how to build something out of nothing, and how to not just build something out of nothing, but to work with and for community, because that's what he did. He worked with his community, he worked for his community, and then his community supported him. And that really, it's a lesson I really learned. He was very, very strong that way. And he just passed this past year. So, he lived a nice, long life. But I learned a lot of that from him.
For your loss.
But also, thank you. I appreciate that. But also, I'm just scrappy and determined. So I was, I tell the story now, and it sounds much more impressive than it looked at the time. For the first 10 years of my career, everybody was like, what are you doing? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Because I really, when I was doing those, trades for a lasagna, I was keeping a ledger of how much time I spent and how much compensation I got. I, paid taxes on my work from the very beginning. I've always been, I'm such a Capricorn, but I've always just been somebody who likes to do things kind of quote, like I'm, quote, supposed to.
Straight narrow.
Yeah, I mean, you would never look at me or meet me and call me straight and narrow, but in this regard, yes, very much so. I like structure, and I think that, society's rules, and this is a little bit of my Canadianism perhaps, but I think society's rules there's some really good reasons for them. There's a lot of rules that have terrible reasons, but, I believe in paying taxes and stuff like that, and so I wanted to be a part of the system, but I did this because I wanted to, as I said earlier, kind of grow into and grow up into having a thriving, abundant business. And the way that I did that was by building an infrastructure from the beginning. And that really worked for me, like in all the ways. And again, it's something I think a lot of like psychics and astrologers don't talk about enough is the business end, because we all live in the world and somebody's got to pay the rent and somebody's got to buy the groceries. And so there is a business end to it. And
exactly.
And I wouldn't.
It's like a musician, but some are not good, yes. Jessica. Some musicians don't know how to run their business, and they don't do well.
It's true. I mean, I know some incredibly talented intuitives and astrologers, and they're not necessarily super grounded in the material world, or they don't respond to emails or whatever it is, and you know, their practice might not be as thriving as it could be. And then other people are excellent at marketing and business, and maybe they're not that great at their skill, but they'll go far because the world is like that, you know, for better or worse. And I really do love what I do, like so very much. And I feel really blessed that I had this opportunity to be scrappy and to make a lot of mistakes and to, you know, really be good at what I do. You know, I've got my 10,000 hours kind of thing before astrology became so popular, because I think it would have been a lot harder to do in this Instagram age that we're living in. I think it's a lot harder for younger astrologers and psychics. Yeah. At
the right time. Thank goodness for that. I think about that too, how, wow, I am lucky for being placed at the right time of something big that was only really happening at that certain time that I'm a part of that no longer exists. I was just thinking that, and also that you and I actually have some parallels, because in 1992, something just like opened up for me. My life opened up, you know, my career and everything. And then just the gumption and everybody saying, oh, what are you doing? I mean, right out of high school, I was 18, and then I got a job as a flight attendant and moved to a town without a car, a town that I didn't know anybody in, half the country away. And just because I wanted to have a different life, I was ready to go. And they were not ready and never get ready. But I think it's a blessing to have so much intuition, and then you taking it to the level of making it your life, your livelihood, your passion. It sounds like it's a big passion to you too. Yeah. Am I correct with the passion?
Oh yeah, absolutely it is. And you know, I think also in this world that we're living in now, there's so many voices in everyone's heads, literally. You know, everyone's got their phones in their pockets at all times, and doing something as brave as you did of just picking up and moving to some random town, not knowing anyone, I think in some ways it might be harder to do something like that now, because the world is so much noisier, you know. And, you know, part of what I credit some of my biggest risk-taking to is I didn't know better. I didn't know it was a big risk. I didn't know that it was a bold move. I just thought I was doing something that I wanted to do.
I have a question.
Right.
Yes, me too.
This goes back to what you were saying about JoJo Savard being your childhood idol. I mean, is there something about her that you wanted to emulate, or, you know, is that? I mean, I was just curious about that.
Sure. JoJo was, so there's a couple of things. One is, you know, I really, really love her buoyancy. You know, in this world of being psychics, right? In the world of psychics, there's all of these like dark colors and heaviness, and a lot of like, there can be a lot of like scary vibes around it, especially, again, we're talking about the 90s, right? But JoJo was always so playful, and she didn't take herself seriously. She understood what I think so many of us psychics and astrologers understand, which is that some people are going to make fun. Some people are not going to be terribly respectful. And she handled it with so much grace. She's really, she's just fun and dynamic in that way. She also was like a bit of a hometown hero, right? Because being Canadian, there's not that many
cool.
people who, you know, we had our own people who were like, you know, famous people that we saw on TV, but everything she did in English and in French. And she was such a big deal for people in Quebec at the time. You know, I mean, some people hated her, some people loved her. I really loved her. When I told my mother, okay, I'm moving to San Francisco to be an astrologer, she said, go be JoJo. Those were her exact words.
Oh,
and,
that's very supportive.
Yeah, very, very supportive. And so, you know, whenever I've mentioned any kind of like positive thing in my career, my mother's always just like, oh, you know, go be JoJo. That's her, you know, what she returns to. So I really love that. I mean, it's not that I was deeply into JoJo's work. I didn't know her work that well. It's more that she was one of the only models that I had of somebody going into the world and, you know, making a go of this kind of work. Now, that all said, where I'm from in Montreal, every year there was a psychic fair. I'm sure they have them in most places. And this was the thing my mother would take my brother and I to. We would go to the fair every year. So I did see other people, you know, in the world of gemstones and psychic readings and astrology and all of this kind of stuff. I did have access to it in person and not just through JoJo, but JoJo was by far the most famous Quebecois psychic that I'm aware of ever.
You had a lot of support as a young girl, whereas a lot of people would have to hide it, and you never had to hide it. Yeah. So it was very good that you were able to do that. And what nice parents, and the grandfather that you were talking about. Wow.
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. And everything that you saw in him, that you took it on, which is so commendable. That's great. And you have built your business from the ground up, which it goes to show you how that lasts. And it is harder to do that now with the social media frenzy. But also, do you ever think that there's some things about the technical age now that would have been better? Sometimes I think in my line of work, it would have been great to have like the follower system back then. But
yes, yeah.
You're saying not, are you?
Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I have a podcast which is digital. I have, you know, a big Instagram following. You know, there's so many things about technology that make astrology more accessible and make it easier to connect with people who are interested in consuming your content. So yes to all of that. The way that I think it's harder is simply when we're first learning something, it's not a good time to publish it on the internet where you can never delete it. You know what I mean? Because I think when we're first learning something, we want to talk about it a lot. That's how we learn. And I see that with young astrologers is they learn something and then they post about it and then they publish it and they start educating others about it when they are still yet students. And I think that is just a problematic approach to learning and teaching in general. And it propagates
what could happen,
a lot of
though. I see it too, but what could be the worst case scenario in somebody who starts giving out all of this advice as such a newcomer that doesn't really know what they're doing? What is the worst case scenario?
The worst, I mean, there's a couple, but essentially it's misinformation. It's telling people things that are simply not true, making connections that are falsified. And what that can do is two really important things. One is it discredits astrology. And it discredits the person, right? But it also, maybe more importantly, it leads others astray. And I think that when we are working as psychics or astrologers, whenever we're helping people, we have a very serious responsibility to be ethical, to be honest, and to not offer something that we can't actually offer. And I think it is problematic. Like, I don't want to go to a medical student who is like just read about, you know, I don't know, like I don't want to go to a medical student who just read about diabetes and have them be like, oh, I heard about diabetes. I read about it. I'm studying it. I think you have diabetes. This is how you should treat your diabetes. Like, I don't want that. I want to go to a doctor. I want somebody who's been vetted.
Because you are trying to help lead them in their life, help them, guide them, I meant to say, right? Yes. So they could be guided completely the wrong way.
People only turn to psychics and astrologers when they're vulnerable, when they need help. And so it's not just, in my view, as an astrologer, it's not just about giving accurate data. It's about being able to communicate that data effectively. It's about being able to listen to other people. And, you know, if somebody's like really nervous, don't hit them with a hard prediction. That's not going to help. You know, it's about figuring out how to communicate the information, not just dropping information. And that takes skill, you know, and it takes practice. And I just think there's so much pressure. What's that?
And talent, too, because you aren't just a people person, you can learn, yes, but some things come very naturally. And maybe you were just blessed naturally with things as well, because it sounds like you are at the top of your field. Please spell your last name for me. My messenger wasn't working. I did not get the link to the show, and I want everybody who's listening now to be able to find you and know where to hire you as their psychic and listen to your podcast too. I want to know everything, unless Johnny wants to give you a shout out right now with all of that.
Well, I mean, you mean how to contact Jessica?
Yes.
Do you want me to spell my name? It's probably easier if I do it.
Go right ahead.
It's a mouthful.
Okay.
You want me to do it?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay. It's my pleasure. So my website is lovelanyadoo.com, and my last name is spelled L-A-N like Nancy, Y-A-D like dog, O-O. And this is the problem with me having, you know, started my website so many years ago at the beginning of the internet, is that nobody can spell my name, and it was a terrible idea for me to name my website after my last name. But here we are. So it's lovelanyadoo.com.
Wow.
And it really is. It really is. And my podcast comes out once a week. It's an astrology and advice show, and I do answer listener questions. And it's called Ghost of a Podcast, and you can find it all over the internet, or go to ghostofapodcast.com. And I'm also on Instagram, so you can find me. Thank you. You can also find me on Instagram at Jessica_Lanyadoo.
Okay. Good. Well, I'm going to connect with you everywhere. And
thank you.
And I want to also know, are you I'm pretty sure you probably are. Obviously, you have all of the podcast going on and everything. A teacher. Do you teach people? Yes.
I do a little bit. So I do webinars. So I actually just on the most recent new moon, the first new moon of the new year, January 2nd, I taught a class called Planets and Plants, Tools for 2022. So I teamed up with an herbalist named Rachel Buddy, and she and I, so basically I broke down the astrology of 2022 and talked about key transits. And she shared the accompanying plants and herbs that we could use to kind of self-soothe and take care of ourselves through the energies we're going through. I have a bunch of classes for sale on my website. I don't teach beginning astrology, but I do teach I teach astrology a fair amount. Yes.
Okay. Right. Just by actually talking about it so much is teaching people about it.
Yeah. The way I do my podcast is very much a teaching resource, because on the first half of the episode, I answer a listener question, and I will often read a birth chart and explain what I'm seeing and how I'm seeing it, so people can learn from my methodology as I'm working. And then the second half of the podcast, every week, I do the horoscope for the week ahead. So I break down the astrology of what's happening, what's coming up, and how we're likely to feel it, both personally but also collectively, you know, socially, politically, that kind of thing. So, I
can
really love
wherever we find. Yes, it
everywhere
sounds like
podcasts
it.
are heard.
Listen to.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yes, you can hear it everywhere podcasts are heard, and there is.
Good.
And if people are listening and they don't really want to pay for a class, but they do want to know about the astrology of the year ahead, I did drop an episode called The Year Ahead Horoscope 2022. And it is, you know, it's like an hour and a half breakdown of the astrology of the year ahead and what we can expect. So, you know, that's available for free on my feed.
Okay, but we can, for a fee, then we could hear more podcasts, or we can hire you, right? Can you do a whole written up astrology write-up like I got from Arlene Dahl for people? Do you offer that?
I don't know. So I never do it in writing. I've always done consultations verbally because I prefer speaking to writing myself. But also I'm not taking clients at this time. I actually made the decision to not do it during the pandemic because it is just a bit too difficult. Yeah.
Really?
I hate giving.
Is it too difficult?
I don't like giving bad news all the time.
Okay. Yes, it's negative energy that you take in.
Yeah. In 2019, people came in all year long asking, should I do this? Should I do that? I'm planning this. I'm planning that. And in every session, just session after session, day after day, week after week, month after month, I was like, I wouldn't plan on that. I'd save my money. I was just kind of really, I saw what was coming, and I was constantly, directing people to be very conservative, and it wasn't fun for them, and it wasn't fun for me. I think I was right to do that. That was the ethical thing to do. It was the right thing to do, but it was unpleasant for everyone involved, and it really did drain on me to be living through the global pandemic and living through this unstable time, and then, people asking about their futures. So I decided that I could do more good by doing one-to-many instead of one-on-one in this period. And I'll return to one-on-one work, when things are more stable in the world. And in the meantime, it was the right thing to do. And in 2020, as soon as the pandemic hit, I went from one podcast episode a week to 2 podcast episodes a week. And that midweek episode that I dropped was actually more of teaching astrology. And there were shorter episodes where I would teach astrology. So again, if your listeners are interested in learning astrology with me and, they want to just dip their toe for free, you can always just listen to what I called my hot take episodes. And and I did that. So Ghost of a Podcast. You can't miss it. It's Ghost of a Podcast with Jessica Lanyadoo.
Cool name. Well, you got that name right, I would say. That is cool and easy to remember. And, okay, well, we're going to check into that. And that's understandable because you changed it into something uplifting. To learn about astrology is a lot better for people than to go and find out some gloom and doom that everybody was facing. So I get it. But tell us about your book that you wrote.
Oh, okay. My book is called Astrology for Real Relationships, Understanding You, Me, and How We All Get Along. And it is, I love my book. It's a very beautiful book, and it is broken into 3 sections. The first section's about friendship and chosen family, so our community and our friends. The second section is about the beginning parts of dating, hooking up and casual dating. And then the third and final section is about long-term relationships. And I don't just do sun signs. I go through every planet in the zodiac, in the signs and the houses through each of the 3 sections. So it's a different setup than most astrology books. But it is much more inclusive, and it is a really, I hope, reliable and useful tool for learning about astrology, but not in a way that's going to break your brain, because you can just, as soon as you figure out, well, I've got, Venus in the 5th house in Cancer, then you can just flip to that section, open it up, and read the interpretation. So
I love that.
So I love my book. Yeah, thank you. I love it too.
Oh my gosh. This is what I've been looking for, because I can't find this really big. It was like a coffee table book, and it kind of put 2 birthdays together for relationships, and it wasn't very in-depth. This one sounds like more in-depth and real, and something I was just hoping that it was going to be a tool, and it is. So I love it.
It is a tool.
Astrology of Real
Astrology
Relationships?
For real relationships, yeah. And it's also, it's on the shop page of my website, so that's at lovelanyadoo.com/shop. You can't miss it there. And it's also available most places books are sold, and even at your local library potentially.
Oh, cool. Well, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great thing for the resume, that you have I mean, your stuff is there in the library for people to really learn.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And as you can see, I like to encourage people to start free, and then if you love the book, buy a copy, But yeah, I love the book, and it is very inclusive of all different kinds of relationships and all different kinds of people. And one of the things that was really important to me was writing about the astrology of friendship, because I don't think astrology literature kind of focuses enough on friendship, but friendship is so important. I mean, look at the two of you. You've got this great partnership for this podcast, and it's wonderful.
What about a Leo?
Gemini and a Leo.
Can you?
Yeah, Gemini and Leo.
Gets along with most people. Actually,
creative chaos.
Is that? Did you say that about the Leo friendship?
I said Leo-Gemini friendship is creative chaos. It's just two creative
Yeah. When I told
what were you gonna say?
Psychic on the air one time that her birthday was May 28th, she went, "Oh, you little Gemini, you. No wonder you're in radio."
I mean, it's a great combination for two people coming together to make something happen and to pursue interests, to like passionately pursue shared interests. It's a great combination. But that's what I'd say.
What about a Leo friendship women?
So this is where it can go in either direction. And when I say this, it's like, heads and tails of one coin. It's the same coin, right? So two female Leos having a friendship, it's either going to be like, you are my sister, I see you, you see me, we get each other, or you are my enemy, why won't you listen to me? Like, it's a fixed sign. Leo is a fixed sign. It's a very stubborn sign. And, Leos have strong emotions and are very passionate in their self-expression. And so Leos tend to really get along or really not with each other.
What about Gemini, Leo, romance? What about Gemini, Leo, romance?
I couldn't hear.
Gemini, Leo, romance.
I think that's a really great combination. The only issue is it can be a little bit of like, so, Gemini is air and Leo is fire. So that can be, a little bit of hot air, a little bit of steam. It can be steamy, but it doesn't always have
talking about me, by the
longevity.
I know.
didn't think you was.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're not talking about me, by the way. So, yeah.
You can
go ahead and elaborate. Yeah. What?
Yes.
Yeah,
you know who it is that I'm talking about.
Oh.
Yeah. It's not there's no downside to it, but it doesn't always have the roots to it. Like it's not always going to like go very far. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah, but
that's
it's probably
devastating
to Johnny.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Yes.
I'm sorry.
But he'll never give up.
This is the thing to know, is that when you're talking about love and romance, sun signs are interesting, but what you really want to look at is your moon signs, because moon is love and intimacy. So that's actually a very valuable, point of investigation if you have that information.
Yes, it is. Johnny just sat there, didn't even say thank you or wow. Johnny, look at your moon signs, okay? I've never even known that. So that makes it more fun to go back out into the dating world. Yep, it does. Got to know those moon signs. Very important. I'm going to get your book. I love it. The 3 things I love. You. Okay, one of them is long-term relationships. One of them is friendship relationships. And what was the first one? Yep. The middle one is what I call like hooking up and casual dating. It's that thing where you're like, yeah, we're dating, but it's not that serious. Or, yeah, we're dating, but I don't know where it's going. And that's fine for people, and they look for this, or they find out that that's all it is when they put the book to use. then they find that out and then they can move forward.
I mean, I think it's a combination. I think people can use it in different ways. Some people are only looking for casual relationships, but I think, you know, there's so many of the client consultations I've done over the years is people coming into my office saying, I'm seeing this person, or I'm friends with this person and I have a crush on them, or I'm hooking up with this person and I don't know what's going to happen. And those people should look at that section of the book, because they're not just friends, but they're also not in a committed relationship. They're in that in-between thing that can be so passionate and fun, but also mystifying and confusing. So that's what that section of the book is for.
But enjoy it, right? Because
enjoy it while you can.
Forever. Because does it always dissipate? And that's okay, too, because then it turns into something else, which they find out in the long-term relationship, which feels good and satisfying.
That's the hope. But, you know, not all relationships are meant to last. Not all relationships are, you know, going to take off. And I think part of being in healthy relationships truly is about figuring out how to let go when you need to, and how to work on things, because all relationships require work, you know. They're not always, you know, what do they say that well, anyways, I was going to try to get a metaphor going, but I lost it.
At least a little thought it deserved, right?
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it's your relationship. So I would really like this book because it's like a tool that during the times where you're like wondering, but you don't want to ask them their thoughts because that could be a total turn off. You just go to your book and you find the answers that helps because it makes sense. And then I like it. I think it's awesome.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. Well, I love the book as well, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned much from it.
It's fun. Okay, great.
Thank
you. This has been really enlightening. We have learned a lot from you, and I am very impressed, and I can't wait to get all connected with you and everybody. Go and check out Jessica Lanyadoo. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You did it. You did a great job.
Yay. Yes. And yes, and Lanyad, is it 2 O's?
Yes, oddly it is.
What kind of name is that?
It's I'm Jewish, and my father is from Baghdad, so it's an Iraqi Jewish name.
Oh, wow. It actually is very beautiful, you know, off the tongue.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Love
it is. It's just not frenetic. Love Lanyadoo,
right.
Yes.
But I can see why you went with, in the beginning, Love Lanyadoo. That really rolls well. So everybody,
thank you.
LoveLanyadoo.com. Yes, and you had another one where you said Jessica_Lanyadoo.com. Is that?
Yes.
What was that?
Jessica_Lanyadoo is me on Instagram. So if you do go to Instagram, you will see that most of my Instagram feed is, and depending on your personality, you may love this or not, but I make videos where I am a planet, and I describe the transits that are occurring and what we're feeling from the perspective of the planet. So it's very playful and very educational, and it's a little silly, but it's also very substantive.
But it's a great perspective, and it's a way you are associating before the spelling of your name you can use to remember things that seem really hard to remember.
That's the hope.
Really, planets.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope. It's a way of talking about things that can be very difficult to understand, but I'm trying to make it fun and easy to understand, and I'm having fun doing it as well. So that's, you know, if you go to my Instagram, that's what you'll see is a bunch of talking planets, and they're all me.
Everything you do must be so rewarding and awesome. I'm going to definitely check that out as well on Instagram, your Instagram. And also, everybody check out Ghost of a Podcast everywhere where you listen to podcasts for yours. And now, is it still twice a week?
It's only once a week now. In 2021, I pulled it back a little. So it's once a week. It comes out on Sundays. So you can listen to that. Wow. And we just did 240 episodes. So there's more than enough to teach you all about astrology and, help you pass the days and nights.
A lot of content, everybody. A lot of great new things to try out for your new year. So thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on today. It was so enjoyable.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yes, it was.
You are welcome.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're both
Johnny.
so great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming
welcome.
on.
Good night,
thank you, Barbara.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.